punk. What's up? Sorry, being a goof here. Having some fun with Glare. We're listening to Front 242. Front by Front, 88 to 89. I'm Pat, Ground Zero Salem. Once again, hope all are doing well. My usual Friday ritual. Hanging out, cleaning my basement, den, listening to tunes, and then talking at you about them. So yeah, a little industrial, changed things up a little bit. Used to be pretty big into industrial a very long time ago, like high school, 17th century. I was really into, you know, the usual, what you would expect, namely Ministry, Skinny Puppy, KMFDM, a few more obscure bands like Wumpscut and Leatherstrip and Sleep Chamber, which was a weird S&M themed band from around here. I go back to Skinny Puppy pretty frequently, but that's about it. Never got into Front 242, but this was a pretty cheap, like $2 pickup at Savers, thrift store around here. It's a pretty big chain, I think. They might have them near you. Anyway, kind of nice, like rhythm-based, dancey, minimalist industrial to play in the background while I talk about death metal, and more death metal. I have a stack of about a dozen CDs in front of me of like all relatively new releases, a bunch of 2019, a few 2018 ones that I'm catching up with, one from 2014, and then I have a stack of stuff that I'll talk about in a separate update that's all reissues or maybe original pressings. I think they're mostly reissues of just stuff from the 90s that I've been wanting to get into my collection. There's more holes I wanted to fill in terms of getting some finished classics and some other stuff like that, so I'll get into that next time. I don't want to drown everybody in content with a 50-minute long video, although those seem to be well liked, but I'm just going to split it up just because I want to, and it's my channel. The first four actually I have that I bought at the store just from random visits to the mall are all $20 spin releases. Local retailer Newberry Comics. I'm sure I've talked about them before, and if you're from the area, you've heard of them. Carry $20 spin stuff. I definitely wanted to hear the new Tomb Mold and the new Witch Vomit. I liked all the bands, both of these bands' previous records. Ossuarium and Cerebral Rot I was not familiar with, but I'd heard the names plenty, mentioned on social media. Ralph's Rock Diner, who I've only been there once. Good venue that puts on a lot of great shows. Kind of usually too far for me to go with my schedule and everything. They book these bands like crazy, so I knew about them. I just bought them, without hearing them, almost kind of a blind buy kind of deal, just because I was there, taking a little break for myself from hanging out at Build-A-Bear or whatever. So I've got a bunch of $20 spin stuff. The rest of the stuff is stuff that I bought online, stuff that I've been wanting to check out. There's some Unspeakable Acts releases and some other random stuff. A few things that I picked up to support bands that I saw live. You don't really need an intro of me telling you where I bought this stuff, but I'm doing it anyway. Anyway, one of the biggest this year, most talked about, somewhat divisive. Not sure why. Planetary Clairvoyance by Tomb Mold. Like the first two, this is probably my favorite thing they've done so far. The only time I went to Ralph's, I saw them with Horrendous, and they were fucking great. This is an extremely well-composed album. There's very long songs on this, and that does not always jive with me and my power, violence, length, attention span. Beautiful riff structures. They're starting to involve a little bit more like proggy or technical elements, just slightly enough, maybe looking to the technical greats from the 90s, Death as they kind of moved on in their career particularly, or maybe a little bit of Atheist or something, just touches. There's plenty of primal, early classic death metal all over this, like they've been exploring already. They've still got those, Church of Craig Pillard, vocally only, make that clear, style vocals on it, the deep guttural kind of deals. There's little blazes of like melodicism, like classic heavy metal melodicism, just in touches on it. There's a cool sci-fi instrumental in the middle of it that is, I think it's Phosphorine Ultimate. I think that's the one. That kind of splits up the album nice, and it's real scary and weird and staticky. I think this is a great album. I say that it's divisive because there's a lot of, oh god, I don't even want to use, like, pejoratively use the term true metal types, but there's a lot of real serious, real deal people that, you know, all respect where respect is due, been around for a long time, but there's a lot of this kind of gatekeeping in death metal and the you know, the almost kind of cosplay elitism, where people are like, oh, these are nerds from the hardcore scene, these are hipsters, they haven't paid their dues, and where were they playing death metal before? And I mean, they're young guys, they write really good music, none of them seem to have long hair. I don't see why that's relevant. I don't know, I feel like, you know, people need to separate scene bullshit a little bit and maybe just listen to the music. I could be wrong, you know, I feel like their music is slightly coming from a different place. There are a few outside influences slightly, like some of the slower parts, there are a few like almost kind of mosh-inducing breakdown parts. Maybe I'm just imagining it, I don't know. I mean, I hear it also with Outer Heaven, I know, who kind of come from the hardcore scene somewhat as well. But at the end of the day, let's not forget that Dan Lilker was very involved in the hardcore scene. Let's not forget that Corthan played in punk bands first, you know. I could cite so many fucking examples of this, you know. Take music for what it is. It's a very well-written piece of death metal. There's things that I'm not that fond of. I mean, it's crazy how much hype is behind it. Much of it is well-deserved, but all of it, I don't know. I'm getting a little tired of the sci-fi theme in death metal. I mean, I don't care. It's the music that's important. But just seeing lots and lots of spaceships and aliens and that kind of stuff, I feel like that's reaching its saturation point. And all the bands that are doing it are good. You know, I enjoy them greatly. But just to be even-handed and evenly critical about stuff, the music, I have nothing to complain about. I mean, it's not my favorite death metal release of the year, like very favorite. I don't know what that is, but it's certainly up there. It's definitely in like the top 10 or maybe even top 5. But yeah, Toronto's Tomb Mold, Planetary Clairvoyance. Rant over with that. Band that I've been following for quite a while, Witch Vomit. This is their second album. It's hard to call it an album because it only has 7 songs. Well, actually, yeah, it's got 8, come to think of it. So yeah, second album. On $20 spin, buried deep in a bottomless grave. For some reason, I thought it had 7 songs. Oh well. At any rate, they're continuing on with their sort of like grimy, Swedish-inspired, only in guitar tone at this stage, kind of death metal. Again, the same kind of guttural vocals that are on all these releases I'm going to talk about from $20 spin. You know, Romer, Pillared kind of style. I feel like in the very beginning they were almost like a Sweet Death Worship with like kind of a brutal guttural American style vocals, and they've since expanded their songwriting style into something a lot more involved. There's a little bit of complexity you could owe to some American bands like from the Northeast, you know, throughout the 90s. You can use your imagination there. You know, it's not like it's tech or anything like that, but there's a little bit more than just the fast-paced thing that's going on. And there's also like a certain just weird sideways leaning, foreboding, macabre thing that I don't really hear in too much like this. And it's hard to explain exactly what I mean. There's just something slightly off and kind of disturbing about the riffs they write. It's hard to put my finger on. I hear it in one other band in particular, and that's Van Helged, who not a lot of people talk about. Just call me Butterfingers. CD's fine. Digipack here. $20 spin, as I mentioned. Living Tomb by Ossuarium. Okay, this is one that I wasn't familiar with. I saw it on the shelves, actually, first before anything else. I knew nothing about this band. Witch Vomit, Ossuarium, and Cerebral Rot are all from the Pacific Northwest. One of them is from Seattle, and the other 2 are from Portland. Can't remember which. I think Ossuarium's the one from Seattle. Doesn't matter. I'll put a caption. You know, that's the area of the country. This is like Death Doom kind of stuff. You know, feel like that genre tag is a bit overused these days and is kind of reductive, but they really do drudge out the kind of funeral march, funeral procession kind of rhythms on this a lot. I feel like it's almost kind of like a spectral voice for people with a shorter attention span, which works for me. But it has those kind of somber moments and those kind of like clean guitar parts and a little bit of echo and you know, just kind of scary, just close the lid on the coffin kind of feels on it that, you know, is a lot of it's taken from Disembowelment, I feel, and maybe Finnish stuff a bit, like the slower bands like Pertinence. But pretty good. I enjoy it. And then last but not least, out of all the $20 Finn releases, we've got Cerebral Rots, Odious Descent into Decay. Also Northwestern. Out of all these, this is the one that I was the most underwhelmed by that I picked up, and it's the one that won me over the most out of all these as well. Not sure about what about it was. I just thought it was boring. You know, I listen to a lot of music at work while I'm running around, so I don't get a chance to really command full attention at a lot of these things until I come down here and sit down and actually take in a record. First listen, it sounded like just a worship of early Cyanide to me. Just this sort of mid-paced, balls heavy, somewhat kind of repetitive, detuned, thick kind of death metal. And, you know, and that's all well and good, but I was like, oh, okay, you know, good riffs, decent riffs. But it felt kind of, I don't know, just kind of almost boring. And then the more and more I listened to it, the more the riffs kind of sank in and hooked in to me. The more I started to appreciate the little creepy passages. Their use of lead guitars are very sparing, but they're often used to kind of, on a higher range, kind of mimic the main riff. And it's kind of echoey as well as the vocals are echoey. It creates a cool vibe, I feel. And then they have like the other kind of solos that they do that are like whinnying stallion, like Jeff Hanneman style kind of stuff. You know, I mean, it's definitely protruding forehead, unibrow, missing a chromosome, powering your car with your feet, ordering a gigantic, comically large brontosaurus burger through, you know, another dinosaur. You get what I'm saying. Not to use the other C word too much with this, but that's definitely what they're going for, and it works. It just took me a little while to come around to it. The drums also, I should mention, are great. They have this weird approach where the guy feels like the guy's kind of playing deliberately below his ability. Maybe I'm just picking that up for no good reason, but they're behind the beat a little bit, and it feels like it's slowed down, like a record on the wrong speed. Makes you question whether or not you accidentally ingested some cough syrup that morning. And all those elements of it are pretty cool. Next up, Visionaire of Death by Sadistic Ritual. So this came out on Unspeakable Acts, which is a subsidiary of Dark Descent. I've talked about that before. I got a blind box from them a while ago that I was really happy with. They've put out a lot of good stuff. It seems like they're gaining a lot of steam and doing a lot more releases in the past couple of years, and everything that, I don't know the owner's name off the top of my head, but everything that he handpicks and curates for the label out of new bands, I'm pretty impressed by. This is a thrash band. They made their debut on the same label, I don't know, 4 years ago. It was an EP. It's one of the things from that label that sold out like really quick, even when the label was relatively new. It's a really vicious brand of thrash. You know, if you're into stuff like Deathhammer, Ripper, who are also on this label, just new thrash that's interesting and extremely vicious, well played, well recorded, but not overproduced. You know, not going for some kind of retro thing, combining enough different influences to feel fresh. This is probably the record of the year for you if you like anything along those lines, that kind of thrash. It's got the ferocity of bands like Demolition Hammer, you know, those bands that were just bridging the gap into death metal in the early 90s, late 80s and early 90s. You know, you can say Sadist too. There's a whole host of them. Brutal thrash, if you will. It's got, rhythmically, it's got that kind of vibe. There's a little tiny bit of blasting. It's very fast and aggressive drumming-wise. But everything else about it is almost like classic 83 to mid 80s thrash. I feel like there's some Canadian kind of stuff in there too. A fair amount of like good Bay Area thrash. It's really nasty. You know, you could say that the thrash influences really run the gamut from everything, but the brutality and the speed is very, to me, very, you know, late 80s, early 90s, Demolition Hammer, Sadist, Epidemic, you know, that kind of thing. But it's just got the catchiness of the classic 80s stuff from several scenes. Very, very fucking good. Up next, Nucleus from Chicago, 2019 release, Entity, also on Unspeakable Acts and Dark Descent. So, first couple times I listened to this, I was like, okay, yeah, you know, straightforward, seemingly straightforward death metal with some extra flourishes, nodding towards a lot of 90s influences. Kind of technical, yeah, kind of technical. And I think that's the way it's produced. It's just got a very solid, straightforward production. And then after listening to it a few more times and really paying attention, because like I said, a lot of this is just playing in the background at work a lot of times, I was like, wow, these riffs are really something. I mean, dude's throwing shapes with his guitar, real angular and wild. I know a lot of people throw Time Ghoul out there as an influence for a lot of bands like this. And it's Time Ghoul and Demolic, right? The Time Lick or Demighoul kind of thing. But I mean, it goes back to Voivod, really, doesn't it? Like these oddly, I wish I knew anything about playing guitar, but I don't. These very odd scales and these very janky, probably rooted in like post-punk, going back to Voivod's influence, maybe. Just all over the neck, kind of odd placement of notes. And I think Nucleus really honors that tradition quite well. But yeah, I mean, they do this sci-fi themed, modern, old school nodding death metal quite well. We've got At the Nexus of Stillborn Worlds by Zealotry. So, this band is a project band that started here in Mass. Now has members in Massachusetts, New York, and Quebec, I believe. Did my research. How good is that? But in a similar vein, but even more out there than Nucleus, there is some wild shit going on with the bass in particular, the first couple songs on here. A lot of the instruments all, you know, playing a song together, but very much doing their own thing on this. A lot of the same kind of name checks as far as the influences go that I just mentioned. Not going to get into it. But, I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Proggy stuff, technical stuff, takes a lot to hold my attention. I mean, obviously, the classic Voivod records from the 80s, I love. First Atheist, First Cynic. Not even Cynic. I don't really even get into Cynic that much, come to think of it. Death Human is a favorite of mine, but beyond that, you know, not that much. Oppressor, a little bit. Certainly no new school, really clinical sounding kind of death metal stuff. I can't even get into it. But these two babies are awesome, well written. I'll put them right next to Artificial Brain as far as technical or proggy kind of death metal records that actually hold my attention. So that's good. Next, Goregang, Neon Graves, another sight unseen pickup from Newberry. Suckered in by the Left Hand Path worshipping cover art. You know, I do a little research with stuff I've never heard of, and I was like, okay, members of Rib Spreader and Wombbath and a bunch of other bands. Weird, because as far as I knew, both those bands were European, and this band is based out of Florida. So I don't know if it was touring members or they sent files on newer stuff they recorded or whatever. One of the guys was also in Soilwork. I wanted to like this, and I ended up just being really lukewarm on certain parts. Trying to be kind here. I mean, this has great reviews all over the place, so, and I'm not a reviewer really, so listen to it and check it out yourself. But the good in it is that it's kind of taking this Swedish death metal into punk thing. You know, the original Swedish death metal bands were very punky, at least compared to the Florida ones and other places in the world. And they, you know, drew a lot of inspiration from their forebears and from Anti-C-Mex and other bands like that. This has that kind of feel with some added influences. this style that was like drawing back from 90s Swedish death metal towards the punk influence, like 1 degree or more, was done pretty well by a few bands in the last decade. I really like Bastard Priest, really like Bombs of Hades. The Miasmal demo was pretty good. 7-inch was decent, never got into the full lengths. At any rate, that's kind of what this band is going for. You know, Swedish DM with a little bit more D-beat and some hardcore influences. And I feel like the hardcore influences is where they kind of start to lose it a little bit. The fast parts, the kind of thrash beats and all that stuff sounds good to me. They go into these breakdowns that are very like, and I like New York hardcore and like a fair amount of 90s chugga hardcore stuff. But they go into like some slow parts that are straight out of that and does not seem, I don't know if that's deliberate or not, if those guys listen to 90s victory bands or whatever, but there's a few just like real like groove mosh, like kind of e-chug parts thrown in with all this like death metal and D-beat stuff that just sounds wrong to me, and it makes me feel weird in a bad way. And I mean, it's just my taste, but I don't care for it at all. Also, there's gang vocals, which I'm usually a fan of, kind of pasted in, and it sounds really strange to me. There's something, they just feel like over the music, kind of mixed in weirdly. And also the guitar sound is filthy. You know, it's pretty much that HM2 thing that everybody and their mother does nowadays. But the production itself is so clean and compressed. I mean, I know it's a 2-man project, so you have like guys on multiple instruments, but there's something about like the life in the air that's just been kind of sucked out of this. To me, you know, I have to always include the caveat, you know, this is just my opinion kind of thing, but for a similar style, right after this, I listened to the new Sect record, which is, you know, hardcore dudes using an HM2 pedal, kind of coming from the opposite, because I feel like these guys are metal guys that are trying to do something a little bit more punk and hardcore while retaining, you know, the death metal roots or whatever. Sect are a band that's on their 3rd record, and just as a comparison, just as like the pedal and style kind of crossing over, you know, they have sort of a grindy, kind of entombed, but kind of American hardcore thing going on. And just looking at the production comparison between the two, Sect is so like panoramic and consuming and fucking heavy, and I need to get that record. And this just sounds like very thin and clinical, despite the fact that you can hear some feedback from the guitar and you can hear the grit going off, all the distortion and everything. I don't know, you know, I have listened to it like at least a dozen times. It still isn't doing it for me, but maybe at some point I'll come back to it and wonder what the hell is wrong with me, because that's happened. All right, getting into the 2018 stuff. Ectoplasma, Cavern of Foul Unbeings. So this is a band I dove in head first on all at once. Let me fix that for you. There you go. This came out of Memento Mori. I really like the first record, Spitting Coffins. As soon as I heard that, I bought this and the new EP that they did, which name is escaping me right now. Cryogenically Revived. There we go. And they're coming out with a new one, also coming out on Caligari, on tape, and a few others. This is a Greek death metal band, traditional death metal band. Spitting Coffins is fucking vicious. That was the one that came out in 2016. Has a certain early Autopsy, Scream Bloody Gore kind of thing going on, a little bit upbeat to very fast, just killer fucking death metal. I don't know how else to put it. Running out of adjectives here. They're kind of bringing in the slower, doomier kind of thing a little bit more, you know, that aspect of Autopsy and Grave and stuff like that, but it's very along the lines of all that straightforward good shit. I recommend Spitting Coffins because it's like 9 songs in about 30 minutes. Everything's very quick and punchy in your face. This has like slower passages, and I like that, and I'm sure that this will grow on me over time. It's very good, but check it out if that sounds like your deal. Cavern of Fallen Beings, Memento Mori. We got Ellorsith, Triumphant Nothingness. This is a compilation that came out in 2018 of this Scottish band's material, 2 EPs and a split. We go back to 2014. I remember seeing a bunch of stuff on YouTube. Maybe their first EP got re-released in 2016 or 17, because that's when I saw a lot of people talking about it. And it was about that Russian pass, Dyatislav, probably butchered that pass, where a bunch of people went missing in 1959. So, you know, interesting historical kind of reference point lyrically, which I'd like to see more of. You know, that's an interesting fucking thing. Musically, that first EP is very black and death metal in the sense that the music has some strong Scandinavian kind of vibes, I feel like. Particularly the first song that has sort of a strong Transylvanian hunger, icy blasting kind of thing. But the vocals are straight up death metal. And then the tempos change. It's got a certain hissy, you know, trebly black metal kind of approach with the guitar and the production in general. The last EP that they did on here, things seem to kind of flesh out into death metal musically a little bit more, but it's also very, very good. I know that the last EP they did was also based on something factual, somebody going missing and some other mysterious stuff going on that happened in the 20s, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what it was. But Triumphant Nothingness, very good band. Nothing else that I own sounds exactly like this. I would recommend it to you a lot if you like black and death metal. Finally, well, a couple more. Wayfarer and World's Blood came out on Profound Lore, 2018. Saw these guys play with Falls of Rorros a couple of months ago. They headlined. Not familiar with them at all. They're from Denver. It's you know, it's atmospheric stuff, kind of nature leaning. You know, that whole side of the equation of black metal, which is something I'm still learning about. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but it's definitely not my least favorite. I have to be in a certain mood for bands like this. I did like this a lot. It seems a little bit more go for the throat than a lot of black metal of this sort of subsect, whether it's, you want to call it nature atmospheric or Cascadian or whatever. They had sort of a Western vibe going on thematically and some touches musically, but it seems a little bit more aggressive. There's a little bit more fast stuff going on to break up the sort of kind of spacey, dreamy kind of shit that these bands kind of do. And they were fantastic live too. And last but not least, we've got Soul Remnants, Black in Blood. So I've been living under a rock. When I was going to shows very often, before I settled down, I didn't really go to black and death metal shows in Massachusetts that much. I was more involved in DIY hardcore and punk and stuff, although I was a huge metal fan. This band's been around since 2007. I just became aware of their existence maybe 7 months ago. I'm pretty sure I saw their name on flyers and stuff, but nothing really stuck with me or resonated with me. I caught them with Mortuary, and then I went and saw them in Salem because they were headlining a show, and it's just vicious, catchy fucking death metal with a lot of other kind of influences thrown in very seamlessly into a pot. I was, you know, doing my usual perusal, looking online, no shame in my game, looking at metal archives to see like shared members and stuff like that. Two of the guys in the current lineup of this anyway were in Year of Our Lord, who were, prior to metalcore being kind of a dirty word, a great band that kind of evoked a lot of dissection, and they were hardcore kids playing quote-unquote melodeath long before it was a popular thing. But they were going for more of a dissection thing than an At the Gates thing. It was really fucking mean sounding, particularly their first EP, The Frozen Divide. Their LP's pretty good, but it's a little bit dialed back in the aggression department. Looks like currently their drummer and guitarist are in the lineup, and I can hear that sort of influence on this material, on the new one, Ouroboros, and this one. Production-wise, it's like worlds apart from most of the stuff that I've been talking about. It's very clinical, very like instruments are all mixed very separately, very fucking precise, and it really works for this. You know, there's no bullshit. You know, there's no syrupy anything in it. It's just aggressive, very listenable death metal that plays around with melodeath a little bit, plays around with black metal on some songs. All the songs that have their own kind of identity on this one and the new one, Ouroboros, which I talked about a little while ago. And live, they sound perfect. They sound like they do on record, and they go nuts, and they're a lot of fun. So, you know, I do realize that the sort of 90s thing is the hot thing right now, and I'm all for it. I like it. But do yourself a favor and check out some Soul Remnants if you like really well produced, just really brutal, in your face, and catchy death metal. I mean, if you like stuff like Hate Eternal, you know, the later on Morbid Angel records, Nile, stuff that's produced like that, it's very comparable and very, very good. All right, managed to get through this one. Now I'm going to record another one. Maybe. We'll see. Have a good evening.